Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Manufacturing Roundtable podcast. I'm Eric Ciampoli, and today I'm excited to be joined by a leader who has built her career in developing people and shaping strong cultures. Laura Crothers is the founder and CEO of Crothers HR Consulting. With over 30 years of experience guiding leaders and organizations, she has been recognized among the leading women in business and entrepreneurship, and her work centers on helping managers grow into true leaders while building cultures that last. In today's conversation, we'll dig into leadership, team development, and how culture drives performance at every level of an organization. I hope you find this conversation useful. Let's jump in. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Lean Leadership Roundtable episode. I'm your host, Eric Ciampoli, and I'm here to offer a warm welcome to Laura Crothers, CEO and founder of Crothers Consulting.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, great to be here with you today.
Fantastic. So we're here. We've invited Laura here because of her extensive background in HR and leadership. Because leadership, if business doesn't have strong leadership, then it isn't a very strong business, right? So these are fundamentals, and we've invited Laura today to share some of her insight in regards to these important factors of a business.
Awesome. It'll be fun.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this.
Okay, so my background, I spent a long part of my career in corporate HR, and I was leading different companies, different divisions of HR for mostly larger financial services companies. I think, Eric, my last kind of big HR role was I headed up M&A at Standard and Poor's. Then I had kids. And I was like, all right, let's see what comes next. I went to a high growth middle market firm that was a startup at that point, and they were well capitalized out of the gate. And we grew from 8 to 250 people in a few years. And I realized, wow, that's a lot more fun to work with those middle market, high growth companies that you can implement things quickly, make changes quickly, really focus on good leadership and management development and how it drives the business. So we worked with them for a while, and they eventually got bought by a bank. So the fun was about to end. And at that point, I hung a shingle of Crothers Consulting. My kids were little, and I wanted to spend more time with them, and figured that this was a good opportunity to focus on doing strategic projects for small and middle market businesses around HR and mergers and acquisitions. So that's how the company started 15 years ago. And I've always wanted to help leaders gain clarity. That's been my mission in my corporate life, whether that's through HR things, through coaching, through development, just to help them get clear on where they're taking the company and all the things that need to happen to do that.
So, how did you first realize the importance of leadership and culture in shaping organizations? When did you have that, oh my gosh, this is important moment?
Probably with some bad leadership, honestly. You realize through the bad leadership, the turnover's super high, people aren't engaged, and you're contrasting it, earlier in my career into, maybe a department or a division, because at that point I was at big companies that had been better and had good leadership. And so it was always something that intrigued me, and that as an HR person, you were working on those 2 things all the time.
Yeah. And it's so funny how those that are looking to improve the culture are oftentimes the ones most resistant to its change, especially if they're the ones losing control.
Yeah, for sure, for sure, and in mergers and acquisitions, you see so much of that, right? So there was a lot of that in my corporate career, just seeing, what happened.
Yeah. I've been parts of some of those merging their operations together, and there's usually a lot of infighting between the two groups, middle management, on who gets to keep control of what.
Right, and if you're not deliberate up front about, what are your leadership needs and what do you want from this group you're buying, and being honest and deliberate with them, right? Then get into this situation where people are really confused and they're not sure what's happening. So it's defining that leadership role as well as, what is the new culture. And sometimes there's an opportunity to morph it into something new between the two companies. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Why not take the best of both?
Absolutely. So, what in general inspired you to start Crothers HR Consulting, and what are some of the defining moments of its growth?
So I think honestly, my kids were at the entering elementary school stage, and I was back to working 60, 80 hours a week during the acquisition by a bank. And I said, I need more work life balance. I want to be the one there with the kids. My dad happened to be dying at that time. So I started Crothers Consulting for work life balance. And what's morphed over time has been, crazy. Honestly, I never expected to be running a business, be an entrepreneur, have 25 people on my team, and be growing double digits every year. When I started this, I thought it was gonna be me and a shingle, just doing some work that was fun for people I knew. And then I realized, wow, most of my contacts were in the large financial services, and I wanted to work with these small middle market businesses. So I need to build a new network around that. And it just kind of all happened. So I think some of the defining moments, um, were when it was just me and a shingle, and we had too many projects where I needed to be clear as a leader. I'm doing this to have work life balance with my family. And so if I start working 80 hours a week on this business, that's not achieving that. So let me bring people in that can do those pieces. Right. So that was like the first moment is like, wow, I got to bring some people on to do this and be true to what I wanted. And I think, another moment was we were helping a company that was being bought by Sidewalk Labs in Google, and I was heavily involved. I was still doing the work of the business versus running the business at that point. And the CEO at the end of the transaction, they closed the transaction. It was good. And he said, can you just like stay on as my coach? Like, how do I hire you? Because this was also valuable from not only, HR and M&A, but from a leadership perspective. And I was like, well, I'm not a leadership coach, right? I'm an HR person. And so I remember calling my leadership coach and I was like, "Hey, I this guy asked me to do this." And he was like, "Laura, you've been coaching leaders your entire career. You are a leadership coach. Just go get certified or whatever you need to do to believe it. But that's what you've done this." So that was one moment where I kind of had to step in to something uncomfortable. Like, am I qualified? I don't know. I had those coaches on such a pedestal, right? Can I really do this for CEOs of bigger, way bigger companies than mine? So, got through that and then hired a lot of really good coaches that are, part of our.
Some of the truth of the matter, though, is like some of the best coaches are the ones that don't have the fancy award that says they're great. They're the ones that understand what the client needs and what the person in the middle, what they're struggling with, and how to steer them the right direction so they don't get lost on their way.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I think for me, I've never been a pure coach. I've been a coach consultant because I think helping them steer that ship is part of what people valued from me. There are other coaches that are the pure coach that ask the questions to get people to steer their own ship. And sometimes people need one or the other or a little bit of both.
Yep, and it takes an expert to know what they need.
By asking the right questions. So that was one, and then the last turning point was COVID. So, so we were an HR, strategic HR project company. Then we were an HR and leadership coaching company, and then COVID hit. And we were, at that point, I had a pretty big team, and I was like, what are we going to do to help our clients? What can we do to stay busy and help our clients? So we took a look and we had done all these training courses in the kind of strategic HR vertical, but we never were advertising them or rolling them. It was just part of that. So we said, why don't we take some of the HR, the courses we've done around team building, around, how do you manage, and then add the remote aspect around, creating calm in chaos and stress management. Why don't we take some of those and offer them to our clients for free right now? Does anybody want a class for your employees? We'll get online and do this. And it took off. And then they said, well, you gave us this for free, so can we buy another one from you? It's like, sure. And now we've got, 50, 60 classes, and we've built training in these little micro learning ways where people get these quick bites. And so that was a defining moment, saying, all right, I think we need to open another vertical, another division of Crothers. So those were probably some of the big ones.
Growth through capability and opportunity, right?
Yeah, honestly, and what people seem to like.
Yeah. And the trick is the timing sometimes, is you may want to offer something, but they're ready yet, or in the phases of working with them. And you got to know when to place those things at the right time where they're open to the opportunity and the benefits of it.
Yeah, and for me, part of it has also been to maximize the strengths of the team. And so the team was really good at the leadership development and management skills training and those things, and they had a passion for it. And so I was like, huh, maybe we need to get away from some of these projects and go more into coaching and training.
Yeah, the coaching's a lot of fun. It's nice to see people grow and evolve and solve their own problems. It's kind of the moment where you can take a little pride in what you've taught someone and how to change the way they think.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Laura, what are the most common struggles that you see new managers face when transitioning into leadership roles?
So, are they managers who know how to manage?
Well, it depends, because a new leadership role could be new to managing and new to leadership, or new to everything.
Right. So, like, there's two different answers depending upon if they're a really good manager and they're stepping into leadership, or if they're really someone who, like you said, ends up being a manager of a smaller firm, which is also a leader.
You choose. Which one do you want to answer?
um, what we've been seeing more of is the latter. It's someone who ends up stepping into management and leadership with not a lot of management skills experience. And so I think what we found people struggle the most with are how learning how to delegate, how not stay in the weeds, right? Delegate, and then how to hold people accountable. And while you're holding them accountable, I think the toughest part for most of them tends to be how to have a good, courageous conversation that is, maybe not so easy. A difficult conversation in a way that's not emotionally charged, that gets the right message across, and that causes some action or accountability.
Yeah, without being too cold. There's a relationship to the conversation. It's warm, it's open, it's nurturing, not criticism, and not inducing any shame factor to them to make them kind of retract from the conversation.
Right, and it's not right, the banging on the table person either. So it could be, yeah, it's this blend, and it is a skill, right? It doesn't, some people have good emotional intelligence. They come into it with some of um, the baggage they need, right, to help do it. But it's something you have to practice and do to get good at.
The conversations I've been having a lot are, and I kind of state this without getting crossing the boundaries of professionalism at work, is, every one of your employees comes to work every day with all of the experiences that they've had recently and in their past, in their lives. And they bring a little piece of that emotional, I don't want to use the word baggage, but those life events and their that creates the persona of who they are. And the image that they bring to work is the representation sometimes that they choose to bring to this specific locale relative to their environment. But it's still driven by all those emotional experiences of managers that they had before and how they responded to them, childhood experiences, the way their parents treat them, and all these little things to find how they react and get triggered in the organization, and what just basic conversations. I've had people go into a full meltdown, and you're like, where did that come from? It's like, wait a minute, time out. We need to have a different conversation besides the one that I was here to have with you. And I've learned that it's more important to see, like, where are they coming from? What's the whole chain of events that brought them here? That's who this person is, and I need to know each one of the people in my organization. What's their backstory, so I know how to connect and develop that relationship with them on their level, so that both of us can benefit from the relationship.
And it's being curious about that, right, Eric? It sounds like you've got that curiosity that you wanna figure it out so that you can help direct the conversation in the right way, and that communication piece is such a big piece of it too. You think of some of those simple tools people use like DISC, but just understanding where someone is versus you and how they best like to receive and give messages, how they want to be communicated with, what's going to be most impactful, um, is about that listening and being curious.
Yeah. So how do you coach your leaders to inspire rather than just manage individuals?
Hmm. Well, I think, inspiring is definitely part of having the vision. So for us, like part of being able to inspire a team is having a vision of where they're going and getting everybody on that vision with you, helping them co-create the vision, where you can. So you've got this vested group that has co created something that they're super excited about. And then you, as a leader, are helping to develop them, watch them flourish, find the best in them, continue to coach them, and do things that really bring them. They know that you're fully invested in them. You're invested in this vision of the company and you're invested in them. And you really want to help them be the best they can be. And those are the leaders that are inspirational.
Yeah, I see a lot of ownership that misses that ball. They're like, I'm the boss. They should just do what I say. I'm like, yeah, but you may have the power of signing the check, but influence is far more powerful than the mighty dollar, because people will do things based on a belief that they're valued more so than just for the paycheck. If I feel valued and nurtured, then I'm going to go that extra mile to make the customer happy and do the right thing, not just because you told me to, but I see the mission, I see the vision, not just because you said do it or else. That doesn't go very far. I learned that since becoming a parent. You can't threaten any result. It's only going to backfire by multiples.
Especially with a 13-year-old. You got that one loud and clear right now, right?
Uh, those are just beginning. It's a whole new lesson in life that I can apply to my professional life.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think that um figuring that out early in your leadership career, how to inspire people in a way that makes them want to work for you, is the kind of leader that we all want to get to, right? Those are the leaders that people will follow anywhere, will really perform amazing things for, and we'll talk about in years. And one of the things when we start our leadership training, if we've got a room of 100 people and we say, we define what a good leader is, which is like this, an inspirational, really top leader. How many of you work for one of these leaders in your career? And you get probably like 60%, 70% of the room, the hands go up. And you're like, okay, how many have worked for two? And at least half those hands go down. How many have worked for three? And you've got like one hand in the room, maybe two. And so what it tells us, and if these are people my age in the room, it tells us like we're really tough on who we hold at that level of leadership. And so leaders also need to know that stepping in that bar is high. If you want to be an inspirational leader where you're building and growing other leaders, um, there's a pretty high bar to climb. And so you have to constantly be thinking about how to be more effective and how to develop yourself. Not I'm the leader, listen to me.
Uh-huh. I'm in charge, so you should listen to what I say. Go run off that cliff at full speed. And like, no, you should do what I say. Like, well, no, that doesn't make sense. Like, listening is a very powerful tool. And what I always try to say it's like the word manager is almost like a four-letter word. Well, why is that? Well, when you just see yourself as a manager, that means you're just managing things. Yeah, but that's what I do. But if you're just the manager, then what more could you be? What are you leaving off? That word, it puts you in a box. When you say manager, what type of positive emotions do you get from, oh, that's my manager? Oh, that's your manager? That's your boss? You know, boss manager. It's like, well, this is my inspirational leader. Oh, that's different. It's more positive. Like when someone talks about you as their manager, what are they going to say? And if you were in their shoes, what would you want yourself to do in order to change that perspective when, hey, guys, I need someone around the table. We've got an urgent customer order. How do we get this energy together so we can make the customer happy so we can get more happy customers?
Right, and it's what you just said is how do we do this, right? So a really good leader doesn't come in thinking they have all the answers, but they've put the right team together to find the answers together, right? To harness that collective effectiveness.
Yeah, the technical description is, or at least the one, I don't know if I invented it or not. It's like the leader's job is to maximize the potential of every individual on their team, provide them the time, the resources, and education necessary for them to succeed.
Yeah, and as leaders, we talk about there's only three things that we've got, right? On our team to get things done. So we've got resources, money, we've got people. So you don't want to use up all your money, you don't want to burn out your people, right? And we've got time, and you've got to really look at those resources, how you do it. How do you put it all together so that you get the right outcome that you need?
Yep. And what practical steps can you advise leaders to take to build that trust and accountability with their teams?
So a lot of it comes down to communication. It's funny. People always say, why do you people always say communication? Because a lot of it is so a practical step is having one-on-ones with your team to start to develop that rapport, having town halls to outline your vision, having small, skip level focus groups, skip level lunches so that you can talk to people and get input from other levels about what can you be doing? What could we asking questions like, how could we be better? What are your ideas for the company? Right? Doing things. So a lot of it is in the communication to the team with the big T word, not just your management direct reports, but the whole team being approachable. And some of it is that continual development journey. Like good leaders are humble and they know that they can always be better. And so they're humble doesn't mean not confident, right? They're confident and they're smart, they're getting stuff done, but they're also humble. They know that they can do better. And so that journey, whether it's they have a coach or they're doing 360s to get feedback or they're reading books or they're part of groups that have other leaders where they're all sharing ideas and how to develop. They need to be on that journey for themselves.
Yeah, yeah, it's very important for that leader to be humble so that they're not threatening because they do a 360 with someone everyone's afraid of. No one's going to really come out because they're afraid of what that person might do. I've been part of those, and it's like, like, you sure you want to even do this? Like, yeah, we need to get feedback. I'm like, from what I gauge, is like you're not going to get an honest opinion. You're going to waste a lot of resources. We need to go back a step and
Develop trust.
yeah, because this individual, no one's going to be honest about it because they wield too much power. You know how they operate. They're more Napoleon than they are leadership. So it's not going to go well if this person's going to get a great review, and we all know it's going to be false.
So it's funny, there are, and you got at this a little bit before, there are three reactive behaviors in all of us, some degree of any of them, which comes from, all of our life experiences from childhood forward, which is, controlling, protecting, or complying. And there's different, things in those. So the controller is kind of that person who wins by sheer willpower, right? And the type A, get it done. The protector is, the leader that is in their head. So they're going to be the smartest one in the room, but they're going to protect themselves by being critical and going distant when things get crazy. And then the complier is the people pleaser who wants to make people happy, and that's what's gotten them ahead. So part of the coaching we do around leadership, as you're talking about what do you do to get better, is really kind of figure out how you're wired. So part of it is knowing enough about yourself and your own wiring, how you became the way you are, and what got you here, right? So those complying, protecting, controlling are gifts of willpower, brain, and heart, which are awesome. And I'm sure that they move us all in our careers until a certain point. And then they start to detract from our effectiveness because we're overusing them, right? And so having people come to that realization of, this is why I'm wired that way. And it served me well for a long time. But in this new leadership role, or the next leadership role I aspire to, um, does this serve me anymore? Does it serve me to please people at the expense of results, at the expense of being trustworthy? Does it serve me to be a control freak and get things done? I'm going to get things done at the expense of building relationships and having trust. Does it serve me to be the smartest one in the room at expense of, right? Like, so, you know, that's kind of the magic in the leader's continual journey for themselves, is figuring out, how do I minimize, how do I become aware? There's that one quote by Viktor Frankl that, our the beauty is kind of in the power of the pause, right? So it's between every stimulus and reaction, there is a space. And in that space is our ability to make a choice. And in our choice is our growth, our freedom and our growth. And that wasn't an exact quote, but that's basically what we're talking about, is like understanding you have a stimulus, your reaction is controlling, protecting, complying. How do you pause and say, okay, I'm wired to react that way, but that's not going to serve me best. I need to think more creatively like a leader on how do I want to react versus how am I wired to react?
Hmm. Brene Brown talks a lot about that and the focus around shame and how powerful that emotion is to humans for both good and evil. And it drives a lot of inner our inner wiring on how we respond to those leaders who use that power struggle, or that use shame, or that use some type of manipulation, or even the overly nice person who's trying to people please that people begin to disrespect because they almost shame themselves. It's like, oh, you're not the type of leader that this company deserves. And like, well, I believe I am, but just my methods don't match your expectations because you're bringing some baggage with you of all your angry managers, and I'm now, because of the contrast between I'm over nice and you're used to the desk pounding, threatening person, and now I seem excessively soft or too nice, where now you lose respect. And other persons say, "Oh wow, finally a nice manager who doesn't scream at me. I like working." Oh, you like that person? They're so soft. Like,
Well, yeah, soft and right, and sometimes when look at those 3 things we've got, sometimes because they wanna do everything to, let's say, please the client at any expense, they're burning up their resources. The people are working like crazy 'cause they're like, "Oh my gosh, they weren't happy with this. We have to just redo that whole 2 months work we did, and for free." And now you're using up your money because you're saying, I'm going to pay my people to redo it, but I can't charge them. But they weren't happy. So I need to just redo it to make them happy at any expense. So, so yeah, some of it is that, but some of it is also those pleasers that go too deep into pleasing are using up, some things that maybe they shouldn't be. Maybe you should be firing that client.
yeah, I was having that conversation with my daughter yesterday. She just started her first business at she'll be 13 in a few weeks. She started an Etsy store, and she starts saying, "Oh, I need to do this, I need to do that." I'm like, "Time up. What do you need to do And what do you want to do? She's like, well, it needs to be perfect. And I'm like, there's no such thing. She's like, but it's got to be perfect. I can't put that one on Etsy. It's not good enough. And I'm like, according to whom? The customer or you? Because if everything needs to be perfect, you might as well close the shop today. She's like, but I'm so excited I have the business. I'm like, you need to learn to differentiate between what you don't think is good enough and what's actually not good enough. There's a very big difference because you're always hardest on yourself,
Right.
right? And those of us that carry family traumas of our parents who are overly critical, nothing's ever good enough because you're always looking for a reason to defeat yourself instead of I am good enough, and this is perfectly, this is good, this is my best. Not is it perfect? Never will be perfect. You'll always find a flaw because we'll create them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great advice that you gave your daughter is kind of that 80-20 rule, right? Like maybe there's times where 80% to you is good for others and you're going to be able to move your business forward and get feedback.
So how do you help companies build a culture that lasts, even though growth and mergers and tough times are always on the horizon at some point?
So I think it starts with being clear on kind of mission, vision, values, and having a collective agreement on the culture you want to create. And then from a there's a bunch of ways, right? Is now you've got to have everybody in your company understanding it and saying it. So you need to build that culture with examples. What does it mean to act with integrity? Well, here's an example, right? What does it mean to be a team player? Well, here's an example. Like here's what we mean. So it's real, it comes to life. And then you need to tie it into everything you do. So from an HR perspective, if you look at that culture you want to create, almost everything you do in HR, Eric, should wrap around it. So when you're bringing people on board, you're hiring them, you're looking for those cultural attributes, you're letting them know what that is to make sure they're making a conscious choice that this is the kind of culture they want to work for. You're then recognizing and rewarding them for exhibiting those behaviors. So you're tying it into performance management, feedback, compensation. You're getting clear, right? You're even the way you exit people is a cultural statement. The kind of benefits you have, the way you pay them, everything can fit into culture, and that leadership team needs to be clear that it matters, not I think what you and I both see sometimes is like, well, that sales guy, that's just the way he is. So, but he's a top sales producer. So, like, don't deal with all the culturally bad things he's doing because he's bringing in money or she's bringing in money. And so when leaders do that and they say, well, that's just Laura and she's, whatever. But like, when they do things like that, that starts to erode at the culture. So they've got to walk the talk and they've got to hold everybody accountable for aligning to what that culture is.
I can't recall a time that I didn't have that conversation about an individual at a company I'm working with. And they go, but that person, they just know everything. And I'm like, so you complain that you can't bring in top people, they don't stay. That's the reason they don't stay. No, no, they told me they found a better opportunity. That's just what they told you. But we all know, if we're honest with ourselves, would you go to work at a place that pays you fairly, but you have to work with someone who makes your life miserable because they want to be in control? And they're not your manager, they're a coworker who just makes the place not nice. If you have opportunities to leave, you'll leave. The scary part is when you're working with an organization like that, and there's a lot of people who don't leave and they still tolerate that. Does that mean you have top talent or people that can't leave? No, no, they enjoy working. They've been here for 30 years. Someone asked me a break. Hey, you got any opportunities for me? And I'm like, listen, I'd love to help you, but I got a no poach rule. Unless you're currently unemployed or you quit, you're off limits. And that's the rules I have for my business. I love you. And I'd love to say, find a place for you. But those are the boundaries that, even though I agree with your opinions, there's boundaries you don't cross. And I'd say, well, if someone said something, listen, I wasn't using names. Like, you need to ask yourself a question. The rules that you're setting in for everybody, they need to apply to everybody. And even though you're afraid to lose that person, they're the reason why you won't grow. Because why would a top guy want to work with this individual? They won't. They'll take the job, they work there a couple of weeks, and then they'll put their resume up again and find a new place, and then delete you from the existence on their resume.
Yeah, 100%. And I would say 99% of the time, when someone finally makes that difficult decision or has that very courageous conversation with that individual that needs to go, that person leaves and they're so worried about it. They're so scared about what it's going to do to the organization. 99% of the time, all the people around are so relieved. They then start telling the boss things they didn't know. Oh my goodness, this person used to do this and do that. And the morale improves, the place improves, and they do not fall apart that they lost that key long-term person who was, and toxic is kind of being overused these days, like, oh, it's a toxic person, but they're not culturally appropriate, right? Whether they're toxic, but they're a bad cultural fit, and like dealing with that is really important.
It absolutely is. Because how do you bring great people to work in an organization that has some thorns in it that just, they ruin the roses?
Yeah. Oh, I've never heard that one. I like that.
I just made it up.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, I'm really good at making both good and bad analogies, and a lot of really bad dad jokes that only I like.
A lot of people like bad dad jokes. You might be able to like put them on your daughter's Etsy something. People like
Oh,
that.
I already told her. I have one that everyone approved that was actually funny, so that one's going to go on a t-shirt.
There you go.
Do you want to hear it?
Of course I do.
Okay, so this is the only one out of the thousands I've attempted. It's like, oh, do you know why they call it an Audi?
An Audi or Odie?
An Audi,
Okay. No.
because it's in the shop Audi time.
Oh,
Bad joke still, but I got approval on that one.
bad joke, but it's a dad joke.
Yeah. So back to business. What are some warning signs that leadership and its culture is holding back the company?
So, you're only as good as your weakest link in leadership. So, collectively, right? If you've got a bunch of great leaders and one that's really bad, it's going to pull that whole leadership down. So, some warning signs are you're starting to get bad engagement survey results. You're seeing more turnover. People aren't coming and having vulnerable conversations with you before they leave, right? If you've got a good culture and things are working, people are going to come talk to you before they decide to leave. They're going to give you the opportunity, especially if it's about money, because they're going to say, I really don't want to leave here. I love it here, but I just got this offer that's $20,000 more and my family could use that money. But I don't want to leave you know, so when people say people leave for money, I say, well, did they come talk to you first or did they hand in their resignation letter? Because if it's the second, then, right, there's another message behind it. But if they have the conversation up front, and if you can't do anything, you usually wish them well. They're not scared to have that conversation because they know at the end that you'll understand as a human, wow, that's a lot of money. And we can't do that at this company, but I really wish you well. And if it doesn't work, come back.
Yeah, the door is open, and some of those underlying root causes for the need for more money as well is not just the failure of the educational system in teaching kids about finance and the use of money. It's people get a raise and they start to outlive their income, and then money becomes a driving pressure for them to leave because they're creating a lifestyle that their check can't cash, and then they hold the company accountable for underpaying them even though they've got too expensive of a lifestyle. I've had factory workers complain that they're underpaid and they're driving a brand new Mercedes, and I'm saying, I drive a Honda. Why do you drive a Mercedes and live in a luxury apartment? What do you mean? I'm like, well, there's a difference between being underpaid and overspending. Which side are you on? I'm underpaid. Okay. Then why do you have so many expensive things?
Right. And the ones who are really underpaid can get a job like that paid more, right? So if you're complaining that you're underpaid, but you can't find another job that pays you more, you're probably not underpaid. It's that simple.
Exactly. So, can you share an example of a company that shifted its culture and saw performance improvements along with it?
Yeah. So there was a company we worked with that was an accounting firm that actually worked with, uh, anyway, it's probably irrelevant, but an accounting firm. And they were trying to shift their culture to be more autonomous engagement and, very uh, to have people be able to participate in decisions, build the kind of culture they wanted, let know that at the end of the day the most important thing to this company was to be able to take care of its employees, by taking care of its clients well, they would be able to take care of and do things to the employees, right? So it was something they really wanted to work on, and we put in a whole bunch of things. We did a lot of training around trust, what you brought up originally. So there was some low trust. So we did a lot of training around speed of trust and what are the different areas trust can be broken and where do you all think, we went through all 200 employees in different sessions, where do you think trust has been broken, what are things that the company could do to restore that, where are areas we need to get better. So we did a lot of work around trust. We did a lot of work around engagement. We did a lot of work of tying pieces together so that what we got clear on the cultural tendons, how are we going to pay people so that they know these are the things that we need to do that are important? And how do we hold those people accountable who aren't? And there were some very difficult decisions there of people that ultimately, they had leave the company, that had been there a long time. And so it was in that continual engagement, getting people's feedback, getting people to participate, seeing that we had these sessions and we talked about things, the leaders were listening, they cared, and then there were actions and there were things they did afterwards to reinforce that we heard you. We want to make these changes and we're going to do these things. Um, and they continued to communicate much more frequently than they had ever communicated. We were coaching leaders, there was management and leadership development for people that had been promoted, from accountant to senior accountant, and all of a sudden they were manager and now they were a partner and they had never had training.
Yeah, it's promotion to failure, right?
Right, it's promotion to um, technical excellence, and some of them had some good management skills and there were some that needed development, and then we also created a dual role to partner, that you could get to partner with technical excellence without having to manage a team, because sometimes you need those rock stars who are just so brilliant at maybe it's one of their things, one of these people was doing is they were kind of all the really funky tax, weird things. They just loved it and they would go super deep in it. And then they also were the main interface with the outsourcing of things to India. And so, being able to work with how do we develop this? How do we then use AI? How do we work with India? How do we just be this expert? But it was somebody who was horrible at managing people, but it was all right because they had other ways they could contribute at a very senior level. So sometimes a dual path is the right thing for companies.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that in the engineering field. Your smartest engineers are not usually the most people persons. They're usually the opposite.
But sometimes, you have one of those. I can think about an engineering company that we had something like that with, where, the mechanical engineering, like the one that would model the stuff, that department, not a good manager, but brilliant. So, like, how do we keep that brilliance? You don't want to lose that, but they could maybe mentor some people, but not manage.
That's a common problem in that vertical. They don't train you to think about people. They keep you black and white in engineering. It's either right or wrong. There's nothing in the middle. And in people and relationships, there's a lot of gray.
Yeah. I tell my one son that who thinks he's like, "Mom, I want to come run your business," but he's kind of that black and white thinker. I'm like, "You got to find a lot of gray before you think about this because this is all about the gray."
And then you got to change that scale for every person you talk to because everyone has a different interpretation of that gray area, where their white and black stops and where the gray begins.
Right, and it's that continuum, right? And so that's part of the magic of people that have been doing HR for a long time is you got that toolkit of, handling things very conservatively or very aggressively and figuring out where that client needs to fall in that spectrum is really important.
Absolutely. And what's good for each person in that company, like you said, a dual path may be an option. Because if you can't hire unlimited people anytime you want, then you need to be concerned about who you're retaining. How do you keep the people that your company needs, both technically and culturally, so that they don't bring their best talents to your competitor?
Right, and that they talk about you positively, you look at that net promoter score that we look for with our clients. You should look for that for your employees too. Are your employees promoting you as a great place to work to their friends? Are they recruiting people? Because honestly, those are typically the best recruits. You only want people working with you who are going to hold up their end of the bargain. So you're not going to be referring your friends who are not good workers.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. I've used that relationship exactly in my business, and the people who work for me now are all those exact referrals, and they're my number one and number one.
Right. Right. No, absolutely. So, if it's aligning for that culture question, how do you shift that culture? It's getting clear on what it is, getting the whole tribe clear on what it is, and then aligning all your people practices so that they recognize, reward, hold people accountable for those kind of behaviors. And that you relook at it every so often too, because in this world of growth and change and it's not necessarily gonna be the same in 20 years. Some companies will be, but some need to change along the way.
If there's one certainty is change. So, Laura, in your view, what leadership qualities will matter most over the next 5 to 10 years?
So, I think the ability to, inspire people as we go through this dramatic change that, we all think the speed of change was pretty high in the last 10, 20 years. I have a feeling it's going to be a bit higher in the next 10, 20 years. So I think that inspirational leader that can manage change, and get people comfortable with change and ambiguity. And to do that, they're going to need a lot of those people skills. They're going to need, high empathy and good communication, emotional intelligence. They don't have to be the most charismatic, stand up and be that. They have to be trustworthy and really vulnerable and in a way that people want to follow them, want to help them make this mission happen.
Yeah, I tell clients all the time when they complain about retention and they say they left for different opportunities or better. I just tell them, people usually quit their boss, they don't quit their job. No, 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 they found a better opportunity, but they didn't quit their job. They like what they did. They just didn't want to do it for you. So ask yourself that question when you do your exit interview. Be honest with yourself. What could you have done to not be having this conversation in the first place? Yeah, but I couldn't offer that. They wanted to work from home 5 days a week. Well, everybody wants to work from home now, but that doesn't mean you're going to stop the market from people wanting to stop working at home. There's some jobs you can, and some jobs you shouldn't, and some just cannot at all. So, what is that person who left for whatever reason they told you? That won't be the last time you have that conversation. It'll likely happen again with a different person for maybe a slightly different interpretation, but the root cause will likely be the same. So you're not listening to what people need.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And having the line managers do the exit interviews, which a lot of companies have kind of gone to, like it is, they're not going to get that data, and it depends upon the level of trust with HR. If the level of trust in the organization is high, people will be honest and tell them if they ask the right questions and create the environment where they feel safe, kind of go to the Brene Brown, right? Creating that. And if the internal HR people don't have that kind of reputation, then you really need, if you really want to get to the bottom of turnover, you need outside people to be having those conversations. And it can be 3 months after somebody left. You can still get in touch with them and say, hey, we know you left. We're really sad you left. You were so good. We just like the company wants to ask some questions. We're trying to get underneath why their turnover is so high. We hired an outside firm. We'll get the honest answers.
Yeah, exactly. Especially 3 months later, where there's no fear of reprisal.
Right. I mean, it's too late to necessarily get them back, although that's not true because sometimes when that happens, someone will tell you the story, and at the end, we always add in questions that would say, "Are you happy now? Is this a good place?" And 50% of the time, they're not.
We've brought people back having that open conversation about why they left. I'm like, hey, so we were reviewing something, and everyone talks about you. Why'd you leave? Oh, this and that. So, well, that person doesn't work here anymore. Oh, really? Would you be interested in coming back? Well, I don't know. I'm like, well, what's really if if you could change anything you want to come back, what would it be? Oh, my salary. No, besides money, because I can't pay you $1 million because then you won't have a job in 90 days. We'll be out of money. So is that what you want? I'll take the $1 million. Like, well, let's move on. But you left because of this reason, and it usually has a face and a name, right? If that doesn't exist anymore, would you be willing to come back and then expand your skills in this organization? It's like usually 75% of the time they're open to the conversation. Sometimes you can't come to the new salary number for where they move to, but oftentimes they'll have that conversation and come in for an interview and sit down again because they left because of a person or a something, not because, oh, I don't like this work anymore, I want to change careers.
Right. Yeah, and many times they've built up a group of friends, people they hang out with, people that they really like, and so they miss that too. We hear sometimes is like, "Yeah, my new job's okay, but gosh, do I miss the blah 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 or the this group?" And so there is an opportunity, to potentially get good people back that have left by asking their people always want to be asked their opinion and their feedback in a safe environment.
Exactly. So, what advice would you give to middle managers who want to grow into true leaders in their organization?
The advice I would give them is number one, get those management skills down. So spend some time making sure that you have that, and then find a mentor in your organization that is the kind of leader that you aspire to be, and spend some time with them and let it be known that you want to move into leadership and start finding ways to take on projects or areas where you can start to show some different leadership potential and practices. And there's a lot of ways that we can be leaders outside of the, C-suite titles. People in individual contributor roles can be leaders. They can lead, a nonprofit kind of function in the organization where you're doing charitable work. They can lead projects. So finding those opportunities where you can lead and then getting feedback about what did I do really well? Where's an area of improvement? Getting that continual learning on your leadership.
Yeah, because you don't know what you don't know until you learn new skills. Then you realize how far you were.
Right. And I mean, coaching and all that is certainly valuable. It's usually a little easier if the company's paying for it when you are moving into those roles. But if you're seen as a high potential, a lot of companies are coaching high potential leaders to get them ready so that they are prepared for the next kind of journey.
Absolutely. So thank you, Laura, for your time and your wonderful insights. We really appreciate your valuable experience. Can you let everyone know how to get in touch with you?
Sure. They can reach us at CrothersHRconsulting.com is our website. And I'm Laura at CrothersHRconsulting.com.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. Thank you again for your contribution and help shaping this leadership conversation, because it's absolutely imperative that companies recognize and adopt the true leadership mission, because without it, your employees will find leaders at another company.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
And thank you to our listeners. We encourage you to subscribe. We're available on YouTube and on Spotify.